Well, the dust is settled from another conference championship weekend. Some things we expected to see, like Texas Tech winning their conference championship, Georgia also winning the SEC, but there are a lot of surprises in the aftermath of conference championship weekend. The college football playoff has been set, and teams moving up and, more importantly, moving down in the final rankings by the committee over in Grapevine, Texas on Sunday. Welcome into Southeast Sports Plus. I'm Gerhard Mathangani, joined by Patrick Walsh. Patrick, we knew that there would be some drama here, and I'll give people a look behind the curtain, because one of the things that you said, we had a group text going on. One of the things that you said going into it is that you thought that Miami might be the team that is in. Not a lot of drama at the top. We know there's 5 conference champions, so one of the three teams, 2 spots, one was going to get squeezed out, and of course it's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
You know, there was one thing that really solidified why I thought that Miami was ultimately going to get in over Notre Dame, and it goes back to last week's rankings when we saw Notre Dame fall below Alabama, even though Alabama just barely squeaked out a win over Auburn.
Right.
Meanwhile, Notre Dame convincingly beat Stanford.
Right.
Good job. I mean, you should win that game.
Exactly.
And you can make the same argument for Alabama. But the second I saw that, all it took for Miami was the hope that BYU would lose that game, because then you could make the argument that BYU would have moved down.
Correct.
And then Miami would move up to that 11 spot.
Right.
And so then we have exactly what the committee wasn't looking at before, and that was, well, Miami and Notre Dame haven't been side by side just yet, so the head-to-head has not mattered.
Right.
Once they put themselves right next to each other, I was like, it's over.
It's
Miami is going to be in over Notre Dame. And I mean, you can hate the decision all you want, but ultimately, when 2 teams are so equal to one another, like literally neck and neck with one another, you have to rely on the head-to-head.
Right.
When you look at the record, when you look at the strength of schedule, when you look at the strength of record, and you look at all the other factors that play into it, they're neck and neck with one another, and that's why it was right next to each other. But it ultimately falls. I get it. I get it, Notre Dame fans. I totally understand.
Right.
Week 1 was, it feels like 2 years ago. But you got to rely on the head-to-head. Otherwise, if that wasn't the case, the sport would be doomed. I hate to admit it.
This is one of those weird situations where I get everything. I get why I think the committee did the right thing overall. They went back to the head-to-head. But the committee's process to get here, that was the issue for everybody. And I think we heard a lot of that in the questioning when Reese Davis was questioning the head of the CFP, Hunter Yurchak. Hey, like, why did this not matter all the way until the very end? So I get it. If you're the committee, you finally, like you said, you put them side by side. It shouldn't have taken the BYU loss to be able to do that. No. But they finally put them side by side and said, okay, yes, Miami did win that game on the field. And I also get it from the Notre Dame perspective of saying, hey, look, the head-to-head hadn't mattered all year long, and then now it finally matters. And so I get them being upset as well. I think a lot of people there's some backlash, but because everything that happened afterwards, Notre Dame saying no to a bowl game, they're not going to play in a bowl, and it feels like some sour grapes. But I feel like this committee finally did the right job. The process was terrible, and I think we have to restart revisiting a few things. One of them is, I think the committee, when they said, hey, you're 5 conference champions, 5 highest ranked conference champions, I know the committee said that thinking we're not going to have any issue with that because they're 5 highest ranked conference champions. They're going to be willing and fitting to go. But then when 5-loss Duke wins the ACC, now you're in this conundrum where you have to put 2 group of 5 teams in, and I am glad the G5 is getting a seat at the table. But this is the year where it's like, if you put James Madison head-to-head with Notre Dame, it's a pretty easy scenario of who's better. You put Texas there with Tulane or Notre Dame, it's an easy scenario. So where I think it's kind of screwed up for college football fans is the whole bracket was to get the 12 best teams in, and it doesn't feel like it's getting the 12 best teams in based on both their framework and their process.
No, and we'll take a look at the bracket here. Obviously, JMU getting that spot over Duke. I think that was, according to what the groundwork was laid out before the season and how the committee was going to evaluate teams, that was the correct call based on that criteria.
Yeah.
While I think, in my personal opinion, I think Oregon-Duke would have been a better game.
Absolutely.
It's still following the right criteria for JMU to get into this game. Alabama-Oklahoma is going to open up the college football playoff. And let me tell you, you pointed this out yesterday, and we'll take a look at some of the lines here in the next block here. But honestly, it's a little bit shocking that Alabama is favored in that game.
On the road.
And I know we have two potential blowouts here, Tulane, Ole Miss, as well as JMU, Oregon. I think the Alabama-Oklahoma game might be, in my honest opinion, one of the worst games of the weekend. I seriously think it could be like a 2007 SEC 7-6 final, just two offenses that just cannot do anything. And then obviously the big one there at the bottom, Miami taking on Texas A&M. What I like about this, though, is Indiana and Ohio State. I know this is an SEC show. You pointed out to me off the show yesterday that you thought Georgia might move up to that number 2.
Yeah.
I think it's the correct call to keep Indiana and Ohio State at 1-2 because for a couple of reasons. And we've seen it here in our area with high school football. Yeah. It seems like, the two best teams in the state seem to match up in the semifinals.
Correct.
Rather than the championship.
Right.
So, this sets up the potential for what I think. Look, Georgia dominated Alabama the other day. Yeah. But I still think Indiana and Ohio State are the two best teams in college football, and it sets up a potential rematch in the national championship rather than the semifinal.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I really had no beef with Georgia being number 3 as opposed to number 2 because I think you can make the argument really either way. Indiana, obviously the clear-cut favorite. Ohio State's literally only loss of the season, is the now new number 1 team in the country, and you saw a Georgia team. They've had some struggles. Obviously, they avenged that loss to Alabama, but they've had some struggles there as well. And like you said, you almost have to think of it big picture. If everything goes chalk, let's just say every, the better seed wins every game. You want number 1, number 2 in the national championship game. And as of right now, that is Indiana, Ohio State.
Yeah, and it just, I honestly think they are probably on a collision course, barring some crazy catastrophe that one of the teams just gets upset. But we saw this same scenario with Ohio State last year. The last game they lost before the playoff was 13-10. They lost the Big Ten championship 13-10. So it'll be interesting. Let's take a look at the final regular season rankings for the college football playoff now. I know we'll get one final one once the playoff is over from the committee. So North Texas, my mean green. It is unfortunate.
I will say, though, that this is the committee saying basically that you were right. You've been on the mean green machine for a very long time. And this is basically saying had they won the conference championship game, they'd be in, but also giving them love ahead of maybe another Power 4 team that was on the outside looking in, maybe a Tennessee or a Missouri or whatever. Putting North Texas in lets you know how much respect the committee had for them.
And I think they would have been the 11 seed. I think they just dropped below JMU because they lost, and obviously JMU is the number 12 seed in the college football playoff. Iowa will take on Vanderbilt in the Rely Quest Bowl. We'll talk with Corey Curtis later and get his projections on that. Georgia Tech and then Houston rounding out that group of 5 there, moving inside the top 20. Tulane, John Summerall is going to take his talents over to Gainesville, so it'll be interesting. Florida fans might get a little bit of a preview here, and he's going to have a tough rematch against Ole Miss, where in the first game they lost by 5 touchdowns.
But exactly, and I think that's an interesting thing going into this, because when you talk about the conference champions, I wonder if that's something that the college football playoff committee will tweak because of what happened this year. And you're right, you do get a game that we have seen before. We saw Alabama, Oklahoma, but I don't think anybody's really complaining about that. But we saw Tulane and Ole Miss play, and you have to ask yourself, if their committee, is this what you want? And anything can happen in a rematch. In Oklahoma, Tulane could shock the world and win that football game.
Who knows if Pete Golding can lead a team? I mean, we don't know yet. Yeah. I know Charlie Weiss Jr. is coming back to call plays, and they still have Joe Judge, but still, it's a new head honcho, so to speak, and your main guy is going to be watching from Baton Rouge, hoping to cash in.
All right, and if I find it really interesting that Tulane, it's so ironic because Tulane will go out there, with John Summerall, and on the other sideline you had the fiasco that's happening with Ole Miss, where their coach was basically kicked out and told not to. It almost shows you that there's ways to handle a coaching search, and I think Tulane is a little bit more understanding of Summerall's situation going to Florida than Ole Miss is understanding about Lane Kiffin going to LSU. I think Ole Miss fans view it as, hey, in 2025, that's a lateral move that we don't really respect. And Tulane understanding, hey, he's going up a notch and taking that Florida job.
I think it also might be a little bit of an advantage for Tulane because not only have you played them before, it's hard to beat a team twice. I don't care what level you're at, but you see the fiasco that went on over there. It's just pure chaos in Oxford.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are probably overlooking this Tulane team. John Summerall is going to want to get a win for Tulane heading into the SEC next year. And I mean, former Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin said John Summerall is going to be in the SEC next year. Well, I mean, he proved it. And honestly, when we start getting into the top 10 here and we start talking about the top 10, I thought Ole Miss might have jumped Oregon just because they have something that Oregon doesn't, and it's a win over a conference champion in Tulane. Right. And I didn't know if the committee was going to want to get a rematch in, but nevertheless, I think Tulane's probably happy that they're just heading up to Oxford rather than all the way to Eugene.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way it was seated was absolutely perfect. A quick little bus ride right up the road there to Oxford.
Yes, and moving inside the top 15 here's where it starts to get frisky for everyone. Utah at 15. Vanderbilt, the story of Diego Pavia and Clark Lee trying to play that 13th game. Corey Curtis tried to will his team into the playoff. It's just it wasn't the year. Maybe next year or maybe in 2 years when the playoff expands that Vanderbilt might, or maybe next year with Jared Curtis coming in, 5-star plus quarterback, number 1 prospect,
which is unbelievable.
Going to Vanderbilt,
the highest ranked player Vandy's ever had.
Yes. Texas tried to make it in as a 3-loss team, unable to. BYU falls, and we talked about it a little bit, even though, I mean, in my opinion, you shouldn't punish conference championship or for making the conference championship, but we knew the committee was going to do this to put Notre Dame and Miami side by side, and that's exactly what they did.
Yep.
And so Notre Dame, unfortunately, is on the wrong side of the bubble, but we'll keep it going here. We'll move inside the top 10.
Yeah, before we do that, do you agree with? Because I think I have one tweak. I would have thrown BYU behind, and I'm not just doing SEC homer stuff. I would have thrown BYU behind both Texas and Vanderbilt. Because the two games, they don't have I mean, they have some good wins, but they don't have a quality win. And the 2 times they stepped up and played one of the power teams, they scored 7 points in both games. And both games were blowouts to Texas Tech. The regular season game was a blowout. The conference championship game was a blowout. I think because of that, I would have slid. I know by record it probably doesn't make sense, especially against a 3-loss Texas team. But I just think the way BYU was playing against top-tier competition, I would have thrown them behind both Texas and Vanderbilt in that 14th spot and have Texas and Vandy go up.
I think that's fair because no diss on the Big 12 or anything, but if you put Vanderbilt or Texas with that BYU schedule, I honestly think they probably go
run the table.
Yeah,
and maybe a loss to Texas Tech.
Yeah, but I don't see either of those teams losing to Texas Tech twice.
Correct, yes, in fashion.
By the way they did. I mean, it looked like, did you even practice? Like, did you even have a game plan? I mean, they just looked like they did not belong. And, well, we'll go right into the top 10 now, Miami, and then another team that kind of looked like maybe they didn't belong and is going to be the topic of controversy, as well as the Alabama Crimson Tide. The first, I got to correct myself earlier in the year, they are the first at-large team to make the college football playoff with 3 losses. I forgot Clemson last year made it with 3 losses, but they were the auto qualifier. That'll set up a rematch with Oklahoma, who has kind of been their kryptonite the last 2 years. Kept them out last year, almost kept them out this year. And then Texas A&M and Ole Miss at 6 and 7. And then inside the top 5 for the first time, we have a little bit of a shakeup at 1 and 2, and that's because Fernando Mendoza and Indiana win their first outright Big Ten title since World War II.
That's insane.
I mean, goodness.
That's insane. They're absolutely on top of the world right now. And Kirk Cignetti is showing the world that you could do it from anywhere. I think Kirk Cignetti winning at Indiana, if you're just a fan of college football, I'm rooting for that story. Maybe not that team, but I'm rooting for that story to be good, because what it does show you is you could be almost anywhere in the Power 5. Because I think that if you were just doing it from a pedigree standpoint, what the Big Ten is, I think obviously you slate Ohio State, Michigan, at times even Michigan State. Then, of course, you add those West Coast teams. So you have Oregon, USC, at times UCLA. I'm just talking pure pedigree, not this year. Pure pedigree. And Indiana probably falls somewhere in the middle to the bottom part of that conference. Yeah. And for them to now be not only a conference champion, but the number 1 seed with the true potential to win a college football playoff game, I think it makes sense in my brain, for people to say, hey, you could do it from where you are.
Right.
And I know it's harder from a James Madison, but if you're Indiana, if you're Ole Miss, if you're not one of these traditional powers that has a bunch of national championship trophies to your name, this is a good story, in my opinion, for people to root for.
Look, Lane Kiffin, there's no doubt about it that he has a history of just getting up and leaving. And I know he tried to say that he found himself in Oxford and that he was like, that's his home.
Right.
But I mean, sometimes the true you does come out, and I mean, he decided, you know what, LSU was a better opportunity. But here's the thing. Kurt Cignetti's doing this all through the transfer portal.
Exactly.
Just wait until Indiana starts pulling 4 and 5 stars. I mean, we're talking. It's a little early to say this, but we could see a Nick Saban-esque type run.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's doing this
crazy.
Just through the portal,
right?
And I mean, Fernando Mendoza didn't really have a good year last year at Cal. Cal wasn't a great team at all.
Right.
But he just has this hidden ability. He found it with Curtis Rourke last year, and now he found it with Fernando Mendoza, and he's got the younger Mendoza coming up as well.
Yeah.
I know he got I believe he only had 1 snap in that game after Mendoza kind of took a shot early in. But before we go to break, I do want to talk a little bit about Alabama.
Yeah,
because obviously this is an SEC show, and there was a lot of talk about, Notre Dame fans wanted Alabama out and Notre Dame in because they lost the 3rd game. But I want to know, do you think it was the right call to keep them in the playoff?
I do, because I don't want the precedent to be set that if you have to play that 13th game, if you have to play a conference championship game, then you are you're almost doing yourself a disservice.
Right.
Because to me, to have Texas A&M sitting out, to have Ole Miss sitting out, I know a loss in the SEC championship game would have given them 2 losses instead of 3, but I do think that, is Alabama playing the best football right now? No. Does Alabama's resume deserve to have them in? Absolutely. Now, let them go into the playoff and then let them show that they're not one of the top 2 teams. I would have a big problem with them if the reason why they were out is because they had to play that game with Texas and Texas A&M, or Texas A&M and Ole Miss did not.
Right, and I mean, when you look at the resume comparison, I mean, it's not even the same, honestly.
For sure.
I mean, both the strength of schedule and the strength of record are in the top 10. Yeah, they don't really pass the eye test right now, but you have to bank on the fact that they have all of these big wins, because why would you even play these games if, you're just not going to take it into consideration?
Correct.
4-2 against ranked teams. Obviously, that 1 loss against an unranked team sticks out, and that's been the topic of controversy in that regard. But I still think the precedent was set last year with SMU making the playoff, even though they lost to Clemson.
Yeah.
And it's going to stay that way, because you cannot – we're already starting to de-incentivize conference championship games.
Yes.
And all that would have done, if you kept Alabama out of the playoff this year, would have been like, why am I even playing a conference championship when I'm sitting in the 9 or the 10 spot right now, and I could lose and then get out of the playoff? Like, why would I even try to play that?
Right. Especially a team like Alabama that's already sitting on those 2 losses. If I'm Alabama, I'd say I would have said, hey, this does us no favors if we go in there and lose this game, much less have the injuries, because Alabama's already banged up anyways. And if they were to have that in the back, to me, it would be a terrible precedent. So I like the fact that the committee did that. I think overall the committee did the right things, given the framework. It's interesting, how they all got it in there and got it on.